Diversity is the fundamental tenet of inclusion. It permits an atmosphere and environment for objectivity and fairness to take center stage. At the Canadian Association of Black Journalists, they are on a mission striving to advance the work of black journalists and other media professionals across the country through inspiration and education. I had the humbling privilege and honor of spending some time recently with Nadia Stewart. She's the association's executive director, and she joined me this week to discuss the association's mission, the current and future state of the journalism industry, and how we get more journalists of color infused into today's newsrooms. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Nadia, I want to take a few minutes and welcome you to the program, and I'm excited to chat with you today about the Canadian Association of Black Journalists. Always great to see you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for the invitation, Kevin. I appreciate it.
I know the mission for the Canadian Association of Black Journalists is to increase diversity and the inclusion of Black journalists through inspiration and education. So I'm wondering if I can start you off by asking you why you think it's important to do this, and what do you think about how the association is accomplishing that stated objective?
You know, I think for so many Black journalists, we feel like we're the only one. You know, you're the only one in your newsroom, or you're one of the few. And when you have that feeling of being alone in your workspace, it can lead to those feelings of isolation, lack of confidence. I know for myself, that feeling of isolation was something that I struggled with early on in my career. So once I heard about the CABJ and found out that there was an opportunity to revive the organization, I jumped on it, and I'm so grateful for the former president, Michelle Lynch, for her just giving me her blessing to pull together a team and relaunch the organization. And as a team, we have really been moving forward with those two pillars of education and inspiration. Education, so we can help to advance the work and the dreams, really, of Black journalists. I think of the CABJ Media Startup Bootcamp, where we teach Black journalists who want to launch their own platforms, giving them all the tools and the skills that they need to step out and launch their own digital media startup. And then I also think of J School Noir, where we invite kids from different communities across the country to come in and learn about journalism and hopefully inspire them to step out and pursue a career in news. So, you know, I look at just those two programs where, you know, we're inspiring and we're educating, and we can already see the impact. In J School Noir, we've seen kids we've had at least one student who told us that she was going to change her major and pursue journalism. And we are about to hand out some $5,000 grants for folks who have gone through the bootcamp program, helping them to get their startup off the ground or build capacity. So in terms of the work that we've been doing and how it's going so far, I'd say we're doing great. There's so much to do. I don't know if we'll ever get it done. And so I'm grateful that what we've rebuilt is an organization that is here to stay.
And I know that one of the pillars of the organization is also So making sure that diversity and staying together is uh, a huge pillar of the organization, and you believe that as Black journalists, we have to stay together and work towards a common goal. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on how that's going and how you think increasing diversity around newsrooms across the country is going as well.
I think for Black journalists, there's strength in numbers. You're more confident when you know that you're not walking alone. And so if we can not just increase the numbers, but increase the level of connection between journalists, between Black journalists across the country, I feel like our voices will be stronger. Our voices are stronger together. And whenever we push for change as Black journalists together, there's just so much more that we can accomplish. I think in terms of representation in newsrooms across Canada, it's long overdue that we see more Black journalists, more Indigenous journalists, more journalists of color in these newsrooms. And I think the racial reckoning that we saw over the summer that has really precipitated this movement that we are still in, and this momentum that we continue to see around this movement. I think, for us, we've always felt, long before this movement, we've always felt strongly about the need for more Black journalists and just more diversity overall. It leads to a better product, it leads to a better newsroom, it leads to better decision making, it leads to stronger organizations. And so I'm glad now that message that we've been preaching, this organization has been preaching for, since it was founded. I'm glad that message that we've been preaching is finally being heard.
And I'm also curious to get your thoughts on the need to infuse more individuals with disabilities in newsrooms, and also advancing forward women of color in leadership positions as well.
I think when we talk about building inclusive spaces in newsrooms or in media organizations in general, this means that our spaces should be inclusive for people with disabilities, which to a great extent, I'm not sure that they are right now. And so I think there has to be this ability to see beyond the disability, to see the ability, the skill, the talent, and the dream that individuals hold, and how this industry should be a place for all, and what needs to change so that we can make it a place where everybody can feel like that dream, that goal of working in a newsroom or launching their own digital media startup or podcast or what have you. We all need to work on making this industry a much more inclusive space. I think for Black women who are severely underrepresented in leadership and right across the industry at all levels, oftentimes what I hear from them as I'm speaking to them as they become new members is that they just don't feel like these are spaces that they belong in. And so I think this comes back to inclusivity and the work that needs to happen to make these spaces safer for them, inclusive for them, and also equipping Black women so that when they get into these spaces, they have the language and also the tools, the skills, so that no matter what they face, it won't throw them off. It won't, take away that, it won't kill the flame. And that's, I think, a lot of what I'm seeing, like so much of what Black women have gone through, it kind of snuffs out the flame and it discourages them. And so I feel like if we as an organization can empower Black women so that the flame never dies, that no matter what they encounter, there's always a community here supporting them, and they always feel like they can move forward as we all work to make this space, this industry more inclusive.
And what would be your message to news directors across the country about the need to diversify a culture and make it more inclusive for Black journalists?
There is something that I always think of as diversify or die. I think nowadays there's no excuse or no avoiding diversity. I think if newsrooms are not looking at their teams and how they can increase representation, they are running the risk of becoming irrelevant to their audience. And I think in many cases there are places that are already so out of touch with their audience because they don't have those voices that represent the Canadian public. So I don't speak too much to news directors, in terms of making the case for diversity. I feel like the case has already been made, and I think that it's up to them at this point to decide whether or not they're going to take that next step, or go beyond that next step, make this, I think, a part of their culture and shift their mindset so that every time there is an opening, their first thought is to look around the newsroom and look at how they can bring more diversity into that team.
And how do you think the landscape of inclusion for Black journalists has improved over the last 3 to 5 years? And then conversely, where do you think more work still needs to be done?
I remember when we relaunched, talking with Hamlin Grange, who was one of the founding members of the CABJ, and he and I were going back and forth on a blog post that he was writing for us because he felt that what was happening in the industry now, what he was seeing in the industry now, that it was worse than when he began. And at first I pushed back on him because I thought, his words were very strong, and I thought, I don't know that it's worse. And he said, no, Nadia, it's worse. I've been around a long time. And he said, back when I started, there were, about a dozen Black journalists at one of the local papers. And he said, now there's just 3. He said, it's gotten worse. And so I don't know that things have improved over the last 3 to 5 years. I don't know that I would say that. I think now we're in a time when we are, as Black journalists, using our voice, or not using our voices. We've always been speaking, but our voices are being heard more now in a way that they have not always been listened to before. And so I think that's the difference.
So what do you think is your greatest hope for the future of Black journalism in Canada?
When we did we had a meeting back in 2019, and we said, what is our focus for 2018? What is our focus? What do we want to see? And ultimately, our team, we just want to see Black journalists rise to the top. We want to see them at the top of their game, at the top of their newsroom, at the top of their careers. We want to see them leading J schools. We want to see them leading projects. We want to see Black journalists rise to the top. And so as we begin to see that happen, because I believe we are going to, as an organization, be part of helping to make that happen. And so as we begin to see that happen, that's when I'll know that the CABJ has succeeded in the work that it set out to do.
And for any young journalists who may be watching or listening to this podcast today, I'm wondering if you can provide them sort of a blueprint for success once they graduate college, or if they're looking to enter into the journalism field. What would you tell them?
I don't think there is a blueprint for success because I think that everybody's journey is different. But what I will say is, as early as possible, develop the kind of resilience that it is going to take to survive in this industry, but also nurture the creativity that it takes to survive. Don't feel like you have to start and end your career in a newsroom and know that it doesn't live or die on that. There are so many other ways that Black journalists can have their voices heard and tell their stories. And so I would encourage young journalists to look at that. Also, I would encourage them, if you love writing, write. Yeah, I heard Camille Dundas say this the other day, if you're a writer, you should be writing. And so if you're a young Black journalist and you love to write, you should be writing, even if that's on your own blog, even if that's on your own platform. If you love making videos, you should be producing videos. Whatever it is that you love doing, don't wait until you get to the newsroom to start doing it. Do it now. Have content that is yours, that you're building. Start making a name for yourself now. You don't need, a paper or a TV station to make a name for you.
I started this podcast on my own, and it has over 100,000 views, so I agree with that, absolutely.
There you go. There you go. You don't need somebody else to do it. You've got the skills and the talent to do it, to build your
A-
own platform.
Absolutely. Diversity is the
Hmm.
spice of life, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is.
And yeah, I'm just going to follow up and ask you about the need for diversification. You talked about that in your last answer, but I also know that getting a journalism job, you have to be sort of flexible in what you want to uh, accept and not accept. I know this from personal experience. So I'm wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on the importance of keeping an open mind and taking advantage of every opportunity that's presented to you, no matter how big or small.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think of my own experience, when I was starting out, and I started out working in community television. So my first job was at the CBC in Newfoundland. I moved across the country to work in Newfoundland, having no family out there, never having any experience working in Newfoundland. So it was, I stepped way far outside of my comfort zone, but it ended up being a fantastic experience. They promised me 8 weeks of work, and 8 weeks turned into 2.5 years, and a host of other opportunities, becoming their weekend anchor and what have you. And then from there, I went on to spend a summer in Edmonton, and then a job in Calgary, and all of that led to me finally being out here in BC for 6 years. So had I not been open to that, I guess, what seemed to be on the surface, a very unstable job opportunity of 8 weeks of work in the middle of nowhere, which was Newfoundland. Had I not been open to that, I don't think it would have led to where I am today here in BC. So I always encourage young journalists, step outside of your comfort zone. If your comfort zone is Toronto, be willing to step outside of that. I do believe as a journalist, if you are going to be reporting on this country, even if what you want to focus on is, Black, you want to focus on, the Black community across Canada. Well, you can't report on the Black community across Canada from just Toronto, because being a Black person in Canada, as a Black woman in Canada, I've had a completely different experience in every major city that I've lived in. And so I truly believe that if you are going to gain the perspective needed to really be an effective journalist, you've got to be willing to go.
I started my professional broadcasting career as a volunteer sports reporter for a local television station in the county. So I can certainly relate to that story for sure.
Yeah. It's, so many people got their start in community television.
And my final question for you, Nadia, is if someone watching this is interested in joining the Canadian Association of Black Journalists, can you tell me how can they do that and the benefits of their membership as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can head on over to our website. That's www.cabj.news. And if you go to the drop-down menu, that should be in the top left-hand corner, you should see a page there for membership. And so once you head over there, it has all the breakdowns, the different categories. Find whichever category you fit into, and then you can become a member of the CABJ. In terms of benefits, again, it really is about community and opportunities. There's a lot of people who are reaching out to the CABJ, and we in turn send those opportunities out to our members so that they can apply for jobs, pursue the opportunities. I just heard back from a young journalist who said that that some of the opportunities that we just shared with her, just in our general email, she has followed up on them, and she now has, it looks like, 2 gigs lined up. So I totally encourage folks to sign up and pursue the opportunities that come up.
Fabulous, Nadia. I myself am a member, and it's helped me get some guests for this podcast. So I appreciate the membership and for your time this afternoon and all the great work that you're doing to advance advance the cause of Black journalists here in Canada. Really enjoyed our conversation. Always delighted to see you, and thank you so much for being here this afternoon.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks again for the invitation, and all the best.
Fantastic. That